Vivian Clark's $900 million deal was bleeding out over a dropped Bluetooth call. No translator. Japanese investors talking in circles. The Mandarin delegate threatening to walk. Daniel reached forward to adjust the volume, trying to help her hear Mr. Takeda's rapid-fire objections. "Don't touch that." Vivian's head snapped toward the driver's seat like a whip crack. "You ape?" "My driver." Her laugh was sharp, cutting. "Don't touch anything in this car." "Your whole year's salary couldn't replace my briefcase." Daniel's hand froze mid-reach. Slowly, he lowered it back to the steering wheel. "Yes, ma'am." Outside the Grand Elysee Hotel, cameras flashed. Reporters clustered near the Mercedes, watching the billionaire CEO stride toward her next conquest. To them, she was power incarnate. To Daniel, she was just another person who'd stopped seeing him 3 months ago. "And for God's sake, sit up straight. You look like—" She caught herself, but the word hung in the air anyway. "Just drive. Professionally." Her voice dripped condescension as she turned away, muttering into her phone. Couldn't they send someone more competent? Daniel heard every word. His jaw tightened. His eyes stayed locked on the rain-slicked Geneva streets ahead. What Vivian didn't know, the incompetent driver she'd just humiliated had once negotiated ceasefires in 4 war zones. What she didn't know, he spoke 5 languages fluently, including the exact 2 she desperately needed. What she didn't know, in less than 90 minutes, this ape would save her entire empire. But first, she'd have to watch it crumble. The Bluetooth call dropped again. "Damn it!" Vivian slammed her hand against the leather seat. Her assistant's text glowed on her phone screen. "Translator canceled. Takeda-san doesn't speak English. Mandarin delegate walking out, 40 minutes to meeting." Vivian's hands trembled as she dialed her CFO. "Richard, I don't care what it costs. Find me someone who speaks Japanese and Mandarin. Now." Daniel watched her in the rearview mirror, pacing in the back seat like a caged lioness. Her perfect updo was coming undone, mascara smudging at the corners. This wasn't confidence anymore. This was panic. He'd driven Vivian Clark for 3 months. 3 months of listening to conference calls about quarterly projections, merger strategies, lab acquisitions. 3 months of invisible service. He knew the truth she wouldn't say aloud. Clark Biotech was over-leveraged. This $900 million deal wasn't ambition. It was survival. 200 jobs hung in the balance. Research programs, clinical trials that could save thousands of lives. And her translator just bailed. Another call. Another dead end. "No, we cannot postpone," Vivian's voice cracked. "They'll walk permanently. 3 years of negotiations." She buried her face in her hands. Daniel had heard enough. He made a choice. The intercom clicked on. "Excuse me, Miss Clark." Vivian's head whipped up, fury blazing in her eyes. "I told you not to." "What languages do you need?" The question hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Vivian's mouth opened, closed, her phone call forgotten. "I'm sorry?" Daniel's voice was calm, professional, steady. "For your merger meeting, what languages do you need?" Vivian stared at him like he'd started speaking in tongues. That's not your concern." "Japanese and Mandarin," Daniel continued quietly. "German, Spanish, French." Something in his tone made Vivian's breath catch. This wasn't the voice of a driver anymore. "You're telling me you speak—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "5 languages fluently," Daniel said. "Would you like me to demonstrate?" The Mercedes fell utterly silent, only the hiss of rain against glass. Vivian's phone buzzed in her lap. "Caller ID, Takeda Holdings, Tokyo." Her stomach dropped into her shoes. "I can't answer that. I don't have—" "May I?" Daniel's hand extended through the partition opening. Vivian's pride warred with her desperation. The phone kept ringing. One ring, two, three. She placed it in his hand. Moshi Moshi, Takeda-san. Daniel's voice transformed. Gone was the careful deference. In its place, confident, cultured authority. The voice on the other end responded in rapid Japanese, formal, irritated. Daniel listened, nodding occasionally. Then he spoke again, his tone respectful but firm. Hi, Sterling-san wa ima junbi shite orimasu. Vivian watched his face in the rearview mirror. His posture had changed completely. Shoulders back, jaw set with quiet command. This wasn't her driver anymore. Daniel switched seamlessly to Mandarin as another voice joined the call. Technical terms flowed from his lips like water. Patent licensing, IP transfers, regulatory frameworks, market penetration strategies. He was discussing her company's most sensitive information in languages she couldn't understand. Wait. Vivian leaned forward. What are you telling them? Daniel covered the phone. There's been a cultural misunderstanding, Ms. Clark. His eyes met hers in the mirror. Your legal team's preliminary contracts used overly aggressive language. They think you see them as subordinates, not partners. They're insulted. Vivian's heart hammered. What kind of misunderstanding? The kind that kills $900 million deals. He returned to the call, switching back to Japanese, his tone apologetic now, carefully respectful. Vivian caught fragments. Sonkei, respect. Bunka, culture. Patona shipu, partnership. The tension on the other end of the line dissolved. What did you just tell them? She whispered. That Clark Biotech deeply respects their family business legacy, that you've been personally studying Japanese business customs to show proper honor. Vivian's mouth fell open. But I haven't. You have now, Daniel said simply, and returned to the negotiation. 20 minutes later, he handed the phone back. They're looking forward to meeting you in person. The merger discussion is back on track. Vivian stared at the phone, then at Daniel's reflection, her voice barely a whisper. Who are you? Daniel pulled the Mercedes into the Grand Élysées underground garage. The familiar concrete walls had never felt so different. Someone who needed work 3 months ago, he said quietly, and someone who still believes in second chances. He parked in Vivian's reserved spot and turned off the engine. In the sudden silence, Vivian could hear her own heartbeat. Daniel. She used his name for the first time in 3 months. I need to know everything. He met her eyes in the mirror. For a moment, the space between front and back seat felt like an ocean. Ph.D. in International Relations, Georgetown University. Masters in Applied Linguistics, Stanford. 22 years as Senior Diplomatic Translator for the United Nations and State Department. Each credential hit Vivian like a physical blow. I specialized in high-stakes multilateral negotiations, G7 summits, EU-China trade agreements, Middle East peace talks. Daniel's voice carried no bitterness, just quiet fact. Budget cuts eliminated my position 2 years ago. I needed work immediately. Your daughter, Vivian said suddenly, remembering fragments of overheard phone calls. Medical school tuition, your mother's cancer treatment, Daniel finished. Stage 3. Experimental therapy not covered by insurance. He looked out the windshield at the concrete wall. I applied for 287 positions in my field, Ms. Clark. Overqualified for most. Too old for others. Too expensive for the rest. Vivian felt something cold and terrible settle in her chest. So you became a driver? I became whatever I needed to be to survive. The parking garage's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Vivian looked at her hands, still trembling from the phone call. Daniel, What could she possibly say? "Miss Clark." His voice was gentle. "Your meeting starts in 35 minutes. We should go upstairs." But neither of them moved. In the enclosed space of the Mercedes, 3 months of invisible service suddenly felt enormous. "I've been listening to your business calls for 90 days, Daniel said softly. "I know every deal, every crisis, every late-night panic about the company's future." Vivian's face flushed hot with shame. "Why didn't you ever say something? Offer help?" Daniel's smile was sad, knowing. "Would you have listened?" The answer hung between them, unspoken, but devastatingly clear. Vivian's phone buzzed. Text from her assistant. "Nakamura Singh delegation arrived early. In lobby now." "They're here," she whispered. Daniel was already getting out of the car, moving around to open her door with the same professional courtesy he'd shown for 3 months. But everything had changed. As Vivian stepped out, she looked at Daniel, really looked at him for the first time. "Will you help me save my company?" Daniel straightened his driver's uniform, nodded once. "Let's go save your company, Ms. Clark." The elevator climbed toward the executive floors in silence. Vivian stared at the numbers, her mind reeling. 22 years of diplomatic service, Georgetown PhD, Stanford Masters. She'd been paying a former UN translator minimum wage to drive her to investor meetings. "Daniel," she said quietly, "tell me about before." The elevator hummed between floors. Daniel kept his eyes on the digital display. "Geneva, 2015 to 2019. WTO negotiations. Helped draft the intellectual property frameworks for biotech patent disputes." His voice was matter-of-fact, professional. Vivian's breath caught. Those frameworks, she'd used those frameworks. They'd saved Clark Biotech millions in licensing fees during her last acquisition. After that, Brussels, EU-African Union pharmaceutical trade agreements. Then Davos for 3 years, translating for heads of state during the World Economic Forum. Daniel paused. "I've translated for 2 UN Secretary Generals, Ms. Clark, 4 G7 summits, the Paris Climate Accords." The elevator stopped at the 42nd floor. Neither moved to get out. "What happened?" Vivian asked. "Funding cuts, 2022. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 30% reduction in diplomatic translation services, last hired, first fired. But your experience meant nothing against budget mathematics." The elevator doors started to close. Vivian's hand shot out, stopping them. "You could have told me. Any time in the last 3 months. Ms. Clark." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. 3 months ago, when I drove you to your first board meeting. Do you remember what you said?" Vivian's mind raced back. "Keep the air at 68 degrees. Don't speak unless I ask a question. And don't look at me in the mirror. It's distracting." Her stomach turned over. "You told me I was furniture," Daniel said quietly. "Well-paid furniture, but furniture nonetheless." The elevator alarm began to chime. Doors held too long. "I'm sorry," Vivian whispered. "I know you are," Daniel said. "Now let's go prove it." The conference room was glass and steel, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Geneva skyline, the Alps hovering in the distance like silent judges. 6 people sat around the table. Mr. Takeda from Tokyo, silver-haired, impeccable suit, hands folded. Dr. Li Wei from Shanghai, younger, sharp-eyed, tablet glowing in front of her. Herr Müller from Berlin, stern, skeptical, arms crossed. Senor Vargas from Madrid, the European contingent's legal counsel, and Vivian's own team, Richard, CFO, Amanda, general counsel. All of them staring at the empty chair at the head of the table. Vivian's chair. She walked in, heels clicking on marble. Daniel followed 2 steps behind, still in his driver's uniform. Every head turned. Takeda's eyebrow raised slightly. Dr. Lee whispered something in Mandarin to her assistant, who stifled a smile. Muller's frown deepened. "Miss Clark," Richard hissed under his breath as she passed. "Why is your driver in the boardroom?" Vivian didn't answer. She took her seat at the head of the table. Daniel stood beside her, quiet, hands clasped, eyes forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivian began, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you for your patience during this morning's communication challenges." Takeda inclined his head politely. Said nothing. Dr. Lee's expression was unreadable. Miller checked his watch. Vivian's throat went dry. "I understand there have been concerns about the preliminary contract language." "Concerns?" Miller cut her off, voice sharp. His English was flawless, but cold. "Ms. Clark, your legal team treated this negotiation like a hostile takeover, not a partnership. The intellectual property clauses were insulting," Dr. Lee added, her English accented but clear. "You structured them as if Chinese innovation is, how do you say, subordinate to Western standards." Takeda remained silent, but his silence was louder than the other's words. In Japanese business culture, Vivienne suddenly remembered, silence meant disapproval. Deep disapproval. Her carefully prepared talking points evaporated. We didn't intend—" "Intent doesn't matter," Miller said flatly. "Impact does." Richard leaned forward, trying to salvage the moment. "If we could just review Section 12.4 of the—" Takeda stood up. "Mushiwake gozaimasen," he said quietly. "I do not think we can continue." Dr. Lee began gathering her papers. Vivian's vision tunneled. $900 million, 3 years of work, 200 jobs, gone. And then, "Takeda-san, mate kudasai." Daniel's voice cut through the room like a bell. Every person froze. Takeda turned slowly, eyes widening slightly. Because Daniel hadn't just spoken Japanese, he'd spoken it with perfect keigo, the formal, respectful register used for honored guests. "Anata no kenen wa mottomo desu," Daniel continued, stepping forward slightly. "Shikashi, kore wa gokai kara umareta mondai da to omoimasu." Your concerns are completely valid. However, I believe this problem arose from a misunderstanding. Takeda's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with intense interest. "Anata wa dare desu ka?" Who are you? "Watashi wa tsuyaku tushite koko ni orimasu," Daniel said, bowing slightly. "Soshite, Sterling-san no shin no ito o tsuteru tame ni." I am here as an interpreter, and to convey Ms. Clark's true intentions. Vivian's heart hammered. She had no idea what he was saying, but she could see the effect. Takeda's posture softened, just a fraction. Dr. Lee had stopped packing her briefcase. "Perhaps," Daniel said, switching seamlessly to English, "we could revisit the contract language with fresh eyes. Not as a Western company absorbing Eastern innovation, but as a global partnership building something neither side could achieve alone." He turned to Dr. Lee, switching to Mandarin. "Li boshi ninde yanju tuandui zaijin keksu lingyu de gongzuo shi kaichuang xing de." "Dr. Lee, your research team's work in gene sequencing is groundbreaking." Dr. Lee blinked, surprised. "Ni du guo womende lu wen? You've read our papers?" "Nye yipian," Daniel replied. "Everyone." Then to Müller, in flawless German, "Herr Müller, die Bedenken bezüglich der Patentklauseln sind völlig berechtigt. Aber was wäre, wenn wir die Struktur umkehren würden?" "Herr Müller, the concerns about the patent clauses are completely justified, but what if we reversed the structure?" Müller's eyebrows rose. "Umkehren? Wie meinen Sie das?" "Gemeinsames Eigentum an allen neuen Entwicklungen, gleiche Gewinnbeteiligung, keine Hierarchie. Joint ownership of all new developments, equal profit sharing, no hierarchy. Mueller leaned back in his chair. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no, and he sat back down. Takeda glanced at Dr. Lee. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Takeda looked at Vivian. "Ms. Clark," he said in careful English, "your interpreter understands what we need. Does he speak for you?" Every eye in the room turned to Vivian. Her CFO looked bewildered. Her general counsel looked horrified. Her entire carefully constructed identity as a self-made genius hung in the balance. And the only path forward required admitting she'd been saved by the man she'd humiliated that morning. Vivian met Daniel's eyes. He gave her the smallest nod. "Trust me." "Yes," Vivian said clearly. "He speaks for me." What followed was a master class in diplomacy. For 2 hours, Daniel moved between languages like a conductor leading an orchestra. Japanese with Takeda, discussing the cultural importance of long-term partnerships, using proverbs about bamboo that bends but doesn't break. Mandarin with Dr. Lee, diving deep into technical specifications about CRISPR applications, mRNA delivery systems, talking like a research scientist, not a translator. German with Mueller, restructuring entire contract sections on the fly, turning adversarial language into collaborative frameworks. Spanish with Vargas, smoothing over regulatory concerns about EU pharmaceutical standards, citing specific directives by number. And when the French Pharmaceutical Board representative called in unexpectedly, Daniel switched to flawless Parisian French, discussing clinical trial protocols and patient consent frameworks. Vivian watched in stunned silence. Her CFO tried to keep up, taking notes frantically. Her general counsel just stared. And slowly, point by point, clause by clause, the deal came back to life. If we restructure the IP ownership as a tiered cooperative, what if the profit distribution reflected actual R&D investment rather than a market position? The regulatory pathway could be simultaneous submission, FDA, EMA, and NMPA. Daniel wasn't just translating. He was building, creating bridges where Vivian's team had built walls. At one point, Dr. Lee laughed at something he said in Mandarin, a genuine, surprised laugh. Takeda smiled, the first smile Vivian had seen from him in 3 years. Even Mueller's stern expression cracked slightly. "This structure," Mueller said finally, reviewing the revised framework on his tablet, "is acceptable. More than acceptable." Dr. Lee nodded. "If this is truly the spirit of the partnership, equal collaboration, shared risk, shared reward, then yes, we can proceed." Takeda looked at Vivian again. "Ms. Clark, you have surprised me. When we arrived this morning, I thought we would be walking away." He bowed slightly. "But your representative has shown us something we did not expect. Humility, respect, true partnership." Vivian's throat tightened. "I believe," Takeda continued, "we have the foundation for something historic." The contracts were revised, printed, and laid out on the conference table. $900 million. The largest merger in Clark Biotech's history. Joint ownership of breakthrough gene therapy patents. Combined research facilities across 4 continents. Projected to save thousands of lives within 5 years. As Vivian lifted the pen to sign, her hand trembled. Not from nervousness, from shame. Because this morning, she'd called the man who saved it all an ape. The signatures were completed. Handshakes exchanged, photographs taken. "Ms. Clark," Dr. Lee said warmly as they prepared to leave, "your interpreter is exceptional. Where did you find him?" Vivian's face burned. He's been with our company for 3 months." "Only 3 months?" Takeda looked surprised. "He speaks like a seasoned diplomat." You should make him a permanent part of your executive team. We should discuss that, Vivian said quietly. As the delegation filed out, Richard grabbed Vivian's elbow. What the hell just happened? Who is that guy? Someone I should have listened to 3 months ago, Vivian said. She turned to Daniel. He was standing by the window, looking out at the Alps, hands clasped behind his back. Silent, invisible again. Daniel, he turned. Can we talk? Please. They went to the hotel's rooftop garden, empty, quiet, just the two of them and the mountain air. Vivienne sat on a stone bench. Daniel remained standing. Sit, she said. Please. He did, but kept a respectful distance. For a long moment, neither spoke. Georgetown, 1998, Daniel began finally. Full scholarship, PhD program in international relations with a focus on conflict mediation. His voice was soft, distant. I was 23. First person in my family to finish college, let alone get a doctorate. My mother cleaned houses to help with my expenses, even though I told her not to. Vivian listened, not interrupting. After graduation, I was recruited by the UN Translation Service. Started in New York, General Assembly sessions, Security Council meetings. The work was everything I'd dreamed of. He smiled faintly. I was good at it. Not just translating words, but translating meaning, intent, cultural nuance. In high-stakes negotiations, that's the difference between peace and war. Your assignments, Vivian said. Geneva, Brussels. Tokyo first, Daniel corrected. 1999 to 2003. Trade negotiations during the Asian financial crisis. I helped translate the agreements that stabilized currency markets across Southeast Asia. He paused. Then Geneva. WTO disputes. Pharmaceutical patent frameworks. Yes, the same ones Clark Biotech uses. I helped draft the language that balanced innovation incentives with public health access. Vivian's chest tightened. After that, Brussels. EU expansion negotiations, then back to the UN for climate accords, refugee crisis summits, Middle East peace talks. 22 years, Vivian whispered. 22 years of believing I was making a difference, Daniel said. And I was. Every translation mattered. Every word choice could shift a billion-dollar deal or save a peace agreement. What happened in 2022? Daniel's jaw tightened. Budget reconciliation. The UN cut 30% of its translation staff. State Department cut even deeper. Diplomatic services were streamlined. He used air quotes, bitter. I had seniority. Commendations. Letters of recommendation from ambassadors, ministers, even a secretary general. But I was expensive, and AI translation was getting cheaper. Vivian flinched. Never mind that I can't handle idioms, cultural context, political subtext. Never mind that a mistranslated word in a treaty can start a war. Spreadsheets don't care about nuance. So you lost your position? I lost my identity, Daniel said quietly. For 22 years, I was Dr. Daniel Washington, senior diplomatic translator. Then overnight I was just unemployed. He stared out at the mountains. I applied everywhere. Think tanks, NGOs, universities, private corporations, 287 applications in 6 months. Why didn't anyone hire you? Overqualified for entry positions. Too specialized for general roles. Too old for tech companies. Too expensive for nonprofits. He laughed bitterly. One recruiter actually told me, "Your resume is too good. It makes people nervous." Vivian's hands clenched. My mother was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer around the same time, Daniel continued. Aggressive. Needed experimental immunotherapy, $18,000 per treatment, not covered by Medicare. And your daughter had just gotten into medical school. Full tuition. Her dream since she was 8 years old. His voice cracked, just barely. So I had a choice. Keep holding out for a position worthy of my credentials while my mother died and my daughter's future disappeared. Or ... quote. Or swallow your pride, Vivian finished. I became a rideshare driver first, Daniel said. Uber, Lyft, whatever paid. Then I found a chauffeur service that hired for corporate contracts. Better pay, health insurance. That's how you ended up with Clark Biotech. Daniel nodded. Your company contracts with Geneva Executive Transport. I was assigned to you 3 months ago. And I treated you like... Vivian couldn't finish. Like furniture, Daniel said gently. It's okay, Ms. Clark. I've been invisible before. To diplomats rushing between meetings, to politicians who only saw me when they needed something translated. That doesn't make it okay. No, Daniel agreed. But it makes it familiar. Vivian stood abruptly, pacing. You listened to every call, every meeting. You knew the business inside and out. Yes. You knew we were struggling, that this merger was life or death. Yes. Why didn't you say something sooner? Offer help? Daniel met her eyes. Ms. Clark, on my first day driving you, do you remember what you said? Vivian's mind raced back. The parking garage, morning rain, Daniel opening the door, smiling, introducing himself. I don't need a biography, just drive. And keep the partition up. I work better without distractions. The memory hit like ice water. I told you not to speak, she whispered. You told me I was a distraction, Daniel said softly. That my job was to be invisible. So you were. Until you needed me to be visible. Vivian sank back onto the bench. I'm so sorry. I know. I mean it. Her voice broke. I built an empire by seeing opportunities everyone else missed. And I missed you. For 3 months. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Miss Clark, can I ask you something? Anything. When you look at me, what do you see? The question hung in the mountain air. Vivian opened her mouth. Closed it. I don't... Before today, Daniel clarified. What did you see? Vivian's throat constricted. The truth sat heavy on her tongue. A driver, she admitted. Someone beneath me. The words felt like poison coming out. Someone who couldn't possibly understand my world, my problems. Someone who was just there. Daniel nodded slowly. And now? Now I see someone who saved my company, who speaks 5 languages, who has a PhD, who negotiated. She stopped herself. That's still not the right answer, is it? Daniel's smile was sad. Miss Clark, I didn't need you to know my credentials to deserve respect. I needed you to see me as human. The words landed like a physical blow. Whether I was a PhD or a high school dropout, whether I spoke 5 languages or only 1, whether I'd negotiated peace treaties or just drove people from point A to point B. His voice was gentle, not accusatory. I deserved basic human dignity either way. Vivian's eyes burned. You're right. I know I am, Daniel said simply. The question is whether you believe it. I do. Vivian's voice cracked. I want to. God, I want to. She wiped her eyes roughly. I built everything from nothing. Scholarships, student loans, sleeping in my car while I finished my MBA. I earned every dollar. I know your story, Miss Clark. Everyone does. So when I made it, when I finally made it, I think I started dividing the world into people who'd earned success and people who hadn't. Her hands trembled. Winners and losers, valuable and invisible. People like me and people like me, Daniel finished quietly. Yes. The admission hung between them. But that's not how the world works, Vivian continued, her voice barely a whisper. Is it? No, ma'am. It's not. You lost your position because of budget cuts, not because you weren't brilliant, Not because you didn't work hard enough. Correct. And I almost lost my company because I was too arrogant to see the most qualified person in the room. Daniel inclined his head. Also correct. Vivian stood, pacing to the garden's edge. Geneva sprawled below, the lake, the jet dough fountain, the UN headquarters in the distance. My father was a janitor, she said suddenly. Did you know that? No, ma'am. Office building in Detroit. Worked nights. He'd take me with him sometimes when my mother was working her shift at the diner. She stared at the city. I'd do my homework in empty conference rooms. Big glass tables, leather chairs. I'd pretend I was the CEO, making important decisions. Her voice hardened. And I swore I'd never be invisible like my father, never be the person people looked through. So you became the person who does the looking through, Daniel said gently. Vivian flinched. Yes. She turned to face him. I became exactly the kind of person I hated. They sat in silence for several minutes. Just the wind through the garden, the distant sounds of the city below. Finally, Vivian spoke. What do you need? Daniel looked up, surprised. Ma'am? To stay. To work for Clark Biotech, not as a driver, as whatever you should have been 3 months ago. She met his eyes. What do you need? Name it. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. You can't fix this with money, Ms. Clark. I know that, but I can start by making things right. Can you? Daniel's voice was soft but pointed. Because this isn't just about me. It's about every person you've dismissed, every employee you've looked through, every human being you've reduced to their function. Vivian swallowed hard. You're right. I've been driving you for 3 months, Daniel continued. Do you know my daughter's name? Vivian's face went hot. No. My mother's name? No. Where I'm from? What I studied? Why I learned languages in the first place? No. Number? No. Each admission was a knife. You've spent 90 days sitting 3 feet behind me, Daniel said. And you know nothing about me except that I drive well and keep quiet. Vivian's throat burned. So if you want to make things right, really right, it's not about a job title or a salary. It's about whether you're willing to fundamentally change how you see people. I am, Vivian said. I swear I am. Prove it. Okay, Vivian said, her voice steadier now. Here's what I'm proposing. She clasped her hands, shifting into business mode, but softer, more careful. I want to create a position, Director of Global Relations and Cultural Integration. You'd oversee all international partnerships, lead negotiation teams, and build out a multilingual support infrastructure for the company. Daniel listened, expression neutral. Salary, $280,000 base, plus performance bonuses tied to successful partnerships, not just my whims. Full benefits, health insurance that covers experimental treatments. She held up a hand before he could speak. I also want to establish a scholarship fund in your name. Full ride support for children of service workers, drivers, janitors, security staff who want to pursue higher education. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. And one more thing, Vivian said quietly. I want you to co-lead a company-wide training program on workplace dignity. Not some corporate checkbox seminar, real mandatory training, starting with me. You? I need to learn this, Daniel. How to see people, how to listen, how to recognize value that doesn't come with credentials or titles. She met his eyes. Will you teach me? For the first time that day, Daniel's professional mask cracked. His eyes glistened. Ms. Clark. Vivian, she interrupted. Please, just Vivian. Daniel took a slow breath. My daughter's name is Maya. She's 24. Second-year medical student at Johns Hopkins Pediatric Oncology track. She wants to treat children like the ones who were in the ward with her when she had leukemia at age 7. Vivian's hand flew to her mouth. My mother's name is Ruth. She's 71. The cancer's in remission now, thanks to the experimental treatment I've been paying for with my driver's salary. She was a school teacher for 40 years in Liberia before the Civil War. His voice strengthened. I learned languages because my family fled Monrovia when I was 12. We were refugees in 4 different countries before we got to the U.S. I learned that language wasn't just communication, it was survival, dignity, the difference between being seen as human or being invisible. Vivian's tears spilled over. I don't just want a job title, Ms. Clark. Vivian, Daniel said. I want to build something that matters. Something that makes sure people like my mother, like your father, like every janitor and driver and invisible person in this company gets seen. Then let's build it, Vivian said. Together. Daniel extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Vivian took it. Not a handshake between employer and employee, between 2 people who'd both been invisible in different ways, and who'd both just been seen. 6 months later, the Clark Biotech Annual Gala, Geneva Grand Hotel, December 15th. The ballroom glittered with chandelier light and champagne glasses. 500 guests, investors, researchers, board members, staff. Vivian stood at the podium in a midnight blue gown, microphone in hand. 6 months ago, she began, I almost lost this company. The room quieted. Not because of bad science or poor financials, because of bad leadership, my bad leadership. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I had become someone who measured human worth by credentials and titles, who looked through people instead of at them, who believed success meant never needing help. She paused. I was wrong. On the screen behind her, a photo appeared. Daniel in the driver's seat of the Mercedes, eyes on the road. This is Dr. Daniel Washington. 6 months ago, he was my driver. Someone I barely acknowledged. Someone I actively dismissed. Another photo. Daniel in the conference room speaking to the international delegation. He's also a Georgetown PhD, a UN diplomat, fluent in 5 languages, and the only reason Clark Biotech still exists. Applause began, but Vivian raised her hand. But here's the thing. He didn't deserve my respect because of his degrees. He deserved it because he's human. Because everyone in this room, from the CEO to the parking attendant, deserves to be seen. She gestured to the back of the room. That's why tonight, I'm announcing the Invisible No More initiative. The screen changed. A company-wide program ensuring every employee, regardless of position, has access to continuing education, language training, and career development. No one will be trapped by their job title. Huge applause. We're also launching the Ruth Washington Scholarship Fund. In the audience, an elderly black woman in an elegant dress gasped softly. Daniel squeezed his mother's hand. Providing full ride support for children of service workers pursuing higher education. Because potential doesn't ask permission from poverty. The room rose to its feet. And finally, Vivian said, her voice thick with emotion, I want to introduce you to Clark Biotech's new Executive Vice President of Global Relations. Daniel walked onto the stage, no longer in a driver's uniform but a tailored suit. The applause was thunderous. Dr. Washington will lead our international partnerships, cultural integration programs, and he's already negotiating agreements with research institutions across 4 continents. Daniel stepped to the microphone. Thank you, Vivienne, he said warmly, but I want to add something. He looked out at the crowd. 6 months ago, I was invisible, but I wasn't alone. There are invisible people everywhere, in every company, every city, every industry. His voice strengthened. People working 2 jobs to pay for a sick parent. People with PhDs driving rideshare because the economy forgot them. People who speak 3 languages but are told they're unqualified. This initiative isn't charity, it's justice. It's recognition that worth isn't measured by what you can see on a resume, but by what you choose to see in a person. The room erupted. Later. That night, Vivian found Daniel on the hotel balcony, looking out at the city lights. "You did well in there," she said, joining him. "So did you." They stood in comfortable silence. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you forgive me? Really? You could have walked away. Could have let me fail." Daniel smiled. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, Vivian. Even billionaires." She laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "You know what's strange?" she said. "I thought success meant being invulnerable, never needing anyone. And now? Now I know success means being strong enough to admit when you're wrong, and humble enough to learn from the people you underestimated." Daniel nodded. "That's wisdom." "Hard-earned wisdom," Vivian said ruefully. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Lee in Shanghai. "The joint research project is exceeding all projections. Your team, especially Dr. Washington, is remarkable. We're changing the world together." Vivian showed Daniel the message. "We are changing the world," he said quietly, "one visible person at a time." 3 years later, Georgetown University. Commencement Day. Daniel stood at the podium in academic regalia, looking out at thousands of graduating students. "I want to tell you about invisibility," he began. "Not the superhero kind. The everyday kind. The kind where you're standing right in front of someone and they don't see you." Students leaned forward. "I spent 22 years as a diplomatic translator. Then 2 years as a driver. The skills were the same. The intelligence was the same. But the visibility changed." He paused. "And I learned something profound. Your worth doesn't change based on who's looking. Your value isn't determined by who can see it." In the audience, Maya Washington, now Dr. Maya Washington, completing her pediatric oncology fellowship, wiped her eyes. Beside her, Ruth Washington beamed with pride, and next to Ruth, Vivian Clark smiled. "So, graduates," Daniel continued, "as you go out into the world, I challenge you. Don't just pursue success, pursue sight. Learn to see the invisible people around you. The janitor who cleans your office might be a poet. The barista making your coffee might be an engineer. The driver taking you to your important meeting might be the person who saves your empire." Laughter and applause rippled through the crowd. Because here's the truth. We're all invisible to someone, and we're all capable of making others visible. The question is, what will you choose to see? The audience rose as one. Standing ovation. Dr. Daniel Washington now serves as Executive Vice President of Clark Biotech and Special Advisor to the UN on Cultural Integration in International Negotiations. The Invisible No More initiative has provided career development support to over 2,000 employees and inspired similar programs at 47 companies worldwide. The Ruth Washington Scholarship Fund has sent 156 students to college. Clark Biotech's $900 million merger led to breakthrough treatments for genetic disorders, saving an estimated 12,000 lives to date. Vivian Clark and Daniel Washington co-authored Seeing the Invisible, a New Leadership Framework, now required reading at 23 business schools. And Vivian never hired another driver. She learned to drive herself.
Thank you for going on this wonderful ride with us. If you enjoyed the ride, please do subscribe and turn on your notifications for more intriguing experience tomorrow.